After surviving Chucky's attack, a young woman is sent to a sanatorium and tries to prove to everyone that the possessed doll exists and has returned in a new guise. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Cult of Chucky, from 2017. In a restaurant in the middle of the night, a couple talk about past traumas. The young woman reveals to the guy, called Andy, that she researched his life on the internet and discovered that he has a collection of guns at home. Andy explains that the guns are for his protection, because in the past, his nanny was eliminated and this left him traumatized. On hearing this, the girl finds the story too suspicious and decides to leave the date. Hours later, Andy returns home and opens a safe hidden in the living room. Inside is none other than Chucky's deformed head, revealing that Andy is the same boy who faced the toy as a child. Since then, he has kept Chucky's head locked away in secret and punishes him for everything the doll has done in the past. Far away, a patient called Nika is undergoing shock therapy, as doctors have diagnosed her as schizophrenic because she is the only one suspected of eliminating her own family. However, the truth is that Nika and her family were also victims of Chucky. However, due to the lack of evidence, everyone, including herself, believes that Nika was responsible for the crimes and that the doll is just a figment of her disturbed mind. Even so, because she had spent 4 years in the psychiatric hospital with good behavior, Nika is transferred to another place, with reduced security. When she gets there, she goes to the living room, where she finds a quiet environment with patients and nurses interacting peacefully. Suddenly, a lady called Angela appears and tells Nika that no one around can see her because she perished years ago in this room. Seconds later, a young man called Malcolm suddenly arrives to scare Angela and tells the newcomer that the lady is just a homeless person with psychological disorders. The two soon strike up a friendship and go for group therapy with Dr. Foley. There, as well as Angela, they meet 2 other patients with similar traumas, Claire and Madeline, who don't like Nika's presence in the hospital at all, because of the crimes she's allegedly committed. Malcolm tries to defend her and explains that it was Chucky, the doll who manifested in the young woman's mind, who caused it. However, at the mention of this name, Angela stands up and says that this same Chucky spoke to her on the phone and warned her that he would be coming after Nika very soon. This makes the atmosphere in the room even more tense and Dr. Foley decides to try a new treatment strategy. He then takes a copy of the pretty boy, the same model as Chucky, so that together, the patients can help Nika deal with her trauma. However, to everyone's surprise, Madeline believes that the doll is her baby and begins to look after it as if it were her perished son. This infuriates Claire who, during her break time, takes the doll from her colleague and starts teasing Nika, because she doesn't want to be part of the doctor's experiment. However, the newcomer is undeterred and manages to recover the doll and return it to Madeline. This argument awakens Malcolm's dissociative identity disorder, which causes him to assume various personalities based on famous people, such as Michael Phelps and Mark Zuckerberg. Nika is surprised by her colleague's illness, but before they can talk about it, she is informed that someone has come to visit. When she arrives in the drawing room, she finds Valentine, the current guardian of her niece, Alice. In reality, Valentine is Tiffany, Chucky's fiancée who, years ago, transferred her soul into the body of actress Jennifer Tilly. She informs Nika that Alice has perished and that, as a last memory, she is leaving a copy of her Chucky doll as a gift, which makes Nika even more upset. Even so, Dr. Foley decides to take the second doll to his office, unaware that it is also possessed by Chucky's spirit. Minutes later, the doll walks through the corridors and reaches the desk of Nurse Carlos, who is distracted by his computer. He then takes a scalpel from the drawer and goes in search of Nika, but finds Angela in front of her room. The lady says she's glad the doll could see her and Chucky reveals that he actually called her a few days ago. However, the woman insists on wanting to talk to the doll, who, without patience, warns her that once he has found Nika, she will be his next victim. Finally, he arrives at the young woman's room and she sleeps in her bed. But before he goes to her, the doll notices a piece of iron missing from the wheelchair. He finds it in the hand of Nika, who has used the iron to make a serious wound in her own body. The next morning, Carlos goes to Nika's room and she wakes up, not understanding how she managed to survive. To make matters worse, unbeknownst to her, her wound has been healed by Chucky, who, before leaving, has left a message in blood, indicating that he needs the girl alive. This leaves Nika even more confused and soon after, she hears an alarm in the hallway and goes to see what has happened. As Chucky promised, Angela was his next victim and the young woman finds her in bed, with an injured wrist and holding the same piece of iron from her wheelchair. Back at Andy's house, he watches a computer recording of the day he talked to Dr. Foley about Nika being innocent. Andy even takes Chucky's head to prove his claim, but the doctor thinks it's all a trick and tells him to leave. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the group gathers once again to talk about the tragedy with Angela. Claire blames Nika, but Malcolm says that the real culprit is Chucky and asks the doctor why there are now 2 of his dolls there. Nika takes advantage of the conversation and asks the doctor to prove that these are just dolls, with no trace of the real Chucky. Dr. Foley then takes the toy, lights a lighter and starts to burn his hand, but the doll doesn't react. Even so, Nika isn't convinced and asks him to do the same with Madeline's doll, but she refuses and leaves. After the meeting, Nika asks Malcolm to help her get her colleague's doll and prove that neither of them is the real Chucky. To do so, she distracts one of the nurses, while Malcolm goes outside to find Madeline. At the same time, Claire sneaks into the doctor's office, picks up her Chucky doll and tries to throw it in the garbage can. However, the doll bites her arm just as the doctor arrives in the corridor with Carlos. Claire shows him the wound and says it was Chucky who attacked her, but the doctor doesn't believe her and takes her for treatment. Nearby, Nika sees through the window that Madeline is with the doll in the middle of a cemetery. Malcolm approaches to pick it up, but before he does, Chucky looks at Nika and mocks her, proving that all dolls are somehow possessed. When she sees this, she despairs and cries out for Madeline, but unexpectedly she throws the doll into a grave. Shortly afterwards, Malcolm arrives to talk to Madeline, but she also pushes him into the grave for no reason. Nika is worried about Malcolm, unaware that Claire is in a much worse situation. Dr. Foley takes her to a room, secures Claire to a bed and injects her with a sedative so that she can calm down. Worst of all, the doctor leaves the Chucky doll in the room with her, while he sets off to see what happened to Malcolm. Shortly afterwards, he and Nurse Carlos arrive at the cemetery and manage to get Malcolm and the doll out of the grave. Nika sees all this through the window, but she notices from the look on her friend's face that he too is now possessed by Chucky's spirit. At the same time, Claire remains motionless on the bed, and when she looks at the chair, she realizes that the doll is no longer there. Then Chucky appears in front of her with an oxygen cylinder. Without a second thought, the doll slams the cylinder into the ground, which shoots towards the glass ceiling above Claire. Unfortunately for her, the shards of glass fall right on top of her motionless body, with one of them severing her head, which falls in front of the toy. Minutes later, Nika arrives in the room and sees her colleague lifeless, which only makes her even more traumatized. Faced with so many tragic eliminations, it doesn't take long for them to become news on the internet. Thanks to this, Andy finds out what happened in the hospital, but he doesn't understand how Chucky's spirit can be in other dolls. So he grabs a copy of the toy from his closet, which Andy cut off just to provoke Chucky even more, and sets off for the hospital. As for Nika, she meets with Dr. Foley and says she is convinced that the eliminations of her family were not caused by her, but by Chucky. However, the doctor doesn't listen and instead suggests a hypnosis session. He injects the patient with a substance and places her in front of a flashing light to begin the procedure. However, the doctor becomes suspicious during the session and makes the patient imagine that it was she who attacked Claire and Angela. What's more, the doctor reveals that, in previous sessions, he touched the patient in disturbing ways, but thanks to hypnosis, Nika remembers nothing. The session continues and the young woman says that Chucky is right behind the doctor, but he doesn't believe her. Unfortunately for him, Nika had told him the truth and the doll hits him over the head with a glass bottle. After knocking the doctor unconscious, Chucky takes a piece of glass from the bottle and gives it to Nika so that she can finish off the doctor who has mistreated her so badly. Instead, Nika finds herself in the hospital corridor, dragging herself away. Mysteriously, she sees her perished niece, Alice, but the girl is acting very strangely. With a macabre smile, she asks her aunt to join the group. Soon after, a projection of Chucky appears behind Nika, holding a knife, showing another victim in the reflection of his blade. After this frightening vision, Nika is transported to the same bed where Claire perished, and there she catches glimpses of Chucky's disfigured face. These images make the young woman wake up from this terrible nightmare and, the next morning, she meets Madeline and Malcolm in the living room. The three of them are sitting at the table, but Malcolm starts acting strangely and says that his current identity is Charles. Nika soon recognizes that this is the real name of the criminal who, before he perished, sent his spirit to the first good guy. She then picks up a pencil from the table, without anyone noticing, and asks Madeline to lend her the doll. However, the patient refuses and leaves, along with Chucky. Nika goes after her, but is stopped by Dr. Foley, who believes it was Nika who attacked him last night. He blackmails her into not revealing the truth, but she's more worried about Madeline who, with each passing day, is being controlled by the doll. Hours later, in the middle of the road, Andy drives to the hospital, carrying a briefcase with various weapons. On the way, he receives a call from Jennifer, possessed by the Tiffany doll, and she threatens him saying that the cult of Chucky is getting bigger and bigger and that very soon, Andy will join them too. Back at the hospital, Nika tries to call Madeline, who continues to look after the Chucky doll in her room. However, after putting the toy to sleep, she tries to smother it with her pillow. At the same moment, Dr. Foley, Malcolm and Nika enter the room and see what she has just done. The doctor forces her to ask the toy for forgiveness, as a way of making her remember what Madeline did to her real son, who was eliminated in the same way. She obeys him, only for Nika to approach the bed and say that the toy is only pretending. Again, no one believes her words and the doctor decides to bury the doll in a tomb, so that his patient's hallucinations will end once and for all. Later, Andy finally arrives at the hospital and asks to see Nika as soon as possible. The guard won't let him in without permission, so he asks to be admitted right away. Angry, the security guard tells Andy to leave, but he responds by punching him right in the face. As a result, he is taken to one of the hospital rooms and begins his plan to capture Chucky. Nearby, Nika fears that something terrible is about to happen and her suspicions are confirmed when the buried doll emerges from its grave. As if that wasn't bad enough, when Nika goes to look out of the window, the second doll appears behind her and injects a sedative into her neck. Shortly afterwards, Carlos shows up at Dr. Foley's office with a mysterious package. When he opens it, he finds Andy's doll, which he sent for reasons as yet unknown. Although he finds it very strange, the doctor just leaves the toy in his room and goes off to do his rounds of the hospital with Carlos. In the meantime, Madeline is in her room and cries at the sight of the doll's shoe, which she has treated as her son. However, Nurse Ashley appears behind her and tells her that she mustn't have contact with the toy, for fear that it will make her even more upset. The nurse then leaves with the toy's shoe, without realizing that the doll itself, which had emerged from its tomb, was behind the bedroom door. On seeing him, Madeline hugs the toy and asks him to put her out of her misery. Chucky complies with his adoptive mother's request and sticks his arm down her throat. Outside the room, Ashley is at her desk, but gets worried about Madeline and goes to her room. However, when she gets there, she finds the doll by the window, while the patient has its arm stuffed in her mouth. With yet another of his patients victimized, Dr. Foley and his team no longer know what to do. Nurse Ashley quits her job and leaves, prompting Malcolm, who was standing nearby, to make fun of the doctor. Enraged, he tells the patient to go back to his room and asks Carlos to throw the doll away. The doctor then goes to his room, where he finds Nika in her wheelchair, bound by a straitjacket. She insists that Chucky was the one who caused Madeline's elimination, but the doctor doesn't care anymore. In fact, he intends to use all these incidents in the hospital to write a book and become famous. Nika is disgusted by the attitude of the doctor, who increasingly seems to be amused by the situation. At the height of his madness, Dr. Foley takes a box containing a pair of high-heeled shoes and puts them on Nika. She threatens the man and says she will reveal the whole truth about him, but he replies that no one will believe a mentally ill patient. Nika spits in his face and pushes him back, not realizing that Chucky was near them. The doll seizes the chance and hits the doctor over the head once again with a glass bottle. Afterwards, he tells Nika that she must put an end to the doctor once and for all, but she refuses. Chucky tries to insist, but just then the second doll appears, missing one of his arms and carrying a huge drill. He tells the other Chucky that Andy is in hospital and the two prepare to finish off their old enemy. But first, Chucky goes to the doll the doctor has received and uses a spell to make it wake up too. The toy wakes up and Chucky explains that he has learned a powerful new magic, capable of transforming toys and humans into clones of himself. He even did the same to Alice, Nika's niece, which led to the girl being eliminated as well. Nika is heartbroken to discover this, while the three Chuckies prepare to carry out their plan. Suddenly, Carlos appears in the room and sees everything, but before he can do anything, one of the dolls hits him in the leg and he falls to the floor. Nika asks him to run away, but the trio of toys surround him and start attacking him mercilessly. After claiming yet another victim, the Chucky that Andy brought with him decides to finish off his owner himself in order to get revenge. Meanwhile, the other two will stand guard to prevent anyone from trying to spoil their plans. Minutes later, outside the hospital, the security guard sees a car stopped in front of the gates. When he looks closer, he sees no one inside, except for the doll, Tiffany, but this was just a distraction and the real Tiffany appears from behind and fatally attacks him in the throat. At the same moment, in the doctor's office, Nika asks Chucky to finish her off once and for all, but the doll has no intention of eliminating her. Instead, he recites the ritual again and transfers his soul to the young woman. Thanks to this, Chucky is in the body of Nika, who gets rid of her disability and gets up from her wheelchair. She then wakes up the doctor, only for him to be conscious while she starts stomping on his head, using the high heels he gave her. Afterwards, Nika, under Chucky's total control, goes to find Malcolm in the living room. He reveals that he has also exterminated Nurse Ashley by shoving the drill into her stomach, as he was taken over by the spirit of the hooded toy. However, Nika tells Malcolm that he is not Chucky and that it was one of his multiple personalities that did this. This causes him to return to his original personality, and then it is revealed that Malcolm was never possessed by Chucky's spirit, he just created another personality similar to his. Defeated, Malcolm says he wants to be Chucky, but instead of granting his request, one of the dolls takes the drill and shoves it behind the man's head. Finally, it's time to eliminate Andy, who is still trapped in one of the rooms. His puppet goes over and, armed with a scalpel, he sticks it in Andy's leg, who falls to the ground wounded. Chucky prepares to deliver the final blow, only for Andy to push him into the wall, shove his hand into the doll's stomach and pull out a pistol. He then eliminates the doll with several shots and ends up stomping on its head several times. Soon after, Nika appears behind him and says that if Andy shoots her, the girl will perish, but Chucky's spirit will remain. Without thinking twice, Andy pulls the trigger, but his gun is out of bullets. Nika laughs at his failure and leaves, but she doesn't forget to leave Andy locked in his room. Minutes later, Nika leaves the hospital and finds Tiffany in the car. Now with Chucky in her body and his fiancée in Jennifer's, it is revealed that Tiffany has also learned the magic to create clones of herself, having done so with the doll in the passenger seat. The two then set off in their car, ready to spread the cult of Chucky and Tiffany to more victims. However, the doll's head, which was locked in Andy's safe, is still missing. This head is still stuck on the living room table and sees a car parked in front of the house. From inside it emerges a woman who, on entering the door, is soon recognized by Chucky as Kyle, Andy's adopted sister. She says she came at her brother's request to continue attacking the doll. Chucky despairs when he hears this, but without hesitation, Kyle pulls out a pair of pliers and uses them against the head of the doll, which screams in extreme pain. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.